Greetings everyone, VesperAegis here. I want to bring some attention to a recent New York Times article I read which brings to light some concerning global warming trends in Antarctica. The article points to a weakening of the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, which is the largest current in the world and actually blunts the effects of global warming. The Antarctic Circumpolar Current, or ACC for short, is a current that is allowed to flow freely and build up strength in no small part because there are no significant landmasses between Antarctica and the nearest point in latitude, Cape Horn on the coast of South America. Deep ocean water from around the world flows into the Antarctic Circumpolar Current and then is upwelled to the surface when it encounters northward flowing water from near to Antarctica, allowing the exchange of heat and carbon dioxide when it surfaces. In recent years, scientists have been scanning the waters using autonomous probes showing that the ACC is changing and also growing stronger. This would in turn take the carbon formerly trapped on the bottom of the ocean and release it into the atmosphere in greater quantities, increasing the chain of positive feedback loops in warming that already exist. In addition, since southern oceans are getting warmer due to global warming already, this stronger current is bringing in warmer water that is beginning to melt the Antarctic ice sheets from underneath, once again hiding from view our effects on climate to an extent. The Times article goes through the history of the exploration of the southern waters around Antarctica. I was surprised to learn, though perhaps I shouldn't have been, that the Polynesians in the 12th and 13th centuries may have sailed as far as the Southern Ocean itself. It also goes into detail about a Cambridge researcher, Dr. Praveen Talidi, who discovers old British whaling ships' temperature and data logs in the Southern Ocean in the 1930s and 50s. The ocean can absorb much more of the heat that is produced by human-induced climate change than it can the CO2 emissions, and if carbon comes up from the dead organic life dredged up from the bottom of the seafloor due to increased intensity of the circumpolar current, it will be that much harder to combat. Ice walls at the edge of the Antarctic act as a sort of arching architectural buttress to keep the ice sheets which traditionally flow from the center of Antarctica outward from flowing into the ocean. Melting from underneath from warm water dragged in could damage this buttress, especially in western Antarctica where peninsulas are close to the circumpolar current and at risk of collapsing, leading to a potential landslide. The wind has shifted from keeping out warmer water to pushing aside cold water and letting warm water in, jeopardizing glacial shelves. And in Omicron and COVID news, amidst many early reports suggesting that the variant may be a milder version, some public health experts and scientists are suggesting that we may be letting our guard down too soon when we still don't have the data. The spread is certainly unprecedented, as new cases leapt within a week from Omicron comprising only 3% to now around 70% of all new infections in the United States. President Biden, for his part, pledged to send 1,000 medical personnel from the military to supplement hospitals around the nation during the surge, mail millions of free testing kits to Americans who request them via website, and establish new vaccination and testing sites. On the other hand, Biden has refused to put into place some of the more restrictive measures that many European countries have recently implemented, at least thus far. Israel is going to begin administering a fourth dose to immunocompromised people as well as those over 60. Interestingly, the Israelis had an extremely intense spike beginning in September, but it tapered off very quickly within a month. This begs the question of whether sudden spikes may not be fully preventable, even among relatively vaccinated populations, but that states and countries which do take intensive mitigation and vaccine efforts have very fast tapering effects. In a move that will no doubt raise the eyebrows of many a conspiracy theorist, Israel conducted a quote-unquote war game against a new hypothetical Omega variant in November before the current variant Omicron emerged. Also in Omicron news, an important new development. In the past week, it has been discovered that 2 out of 3 major monoclonal antibody treatments are not particularly effective against the Omicron variant, and some hospitals have stopped using them while running out of the only monoclonal antibody treatment that works. For the vulnerable and the immunocompromised, the next few weeks and months will be a critical time to stay careful and stay safe. Evidence thus far indicates that vaccines are effective at preventing severe illness, with a South African study of around 78,000 Omicron cases showing that 2 doses of Pfizer has a 70% chance of keeping people outside of the hospital, though more data is still needed considering that South Africa's demographics are significantly different than many areas in North America and Europe. Breakthroughs are much more likely, on the other hand, with only a 30% chance of 2 shots of Pfizer preventing an infection in general. The upper respiratory tract contains fewer antibodies than your lower respiratory tract and lungs, so what is likely happening is that once the virus begins replicating past a certain point, your body's broader immune system builds up and kicks in and fights off the virus eventually. Still, this means that people are infectious for that duration, warranting caution for the immunocompromised and unvaccinated. Once a person receives a booster, however, levels of antibody action seem to be comparable to what was once observed with 2 shots against the Delta variant. Recommendations hence are beginning to shift slightly regarding the 6-month delay between the 2-dose mRNA regimen and the booster dose for those who took the vaccines later this year, with some doctors suggesting to protect against Omicron, it might be reasonable to move the timetable up slightly. One other important thing I learned from an NPR article, for which I will put a link in the description, is that a process called quote-unquote B Cell Maturation begins to occur in your lymph nodes around a month after your initial burst of antibodies from the vaccine regimen, which makes existing antibodies much more potent and liable to attack new strains of the virus in comparison to the more numerous, less potent baby antibodies produced immediately upon vaccine injection. The sort of Spartan army over Union soldiers, if you will, of antibodies. Unfortunately, it could take months for antibodies to achieve this level of soldiery. This is also why it is important not to get a booster too early in the process of maturation, as it may induce your body to create more weaklings over trained antibodies. In Myanmar, over 4,200 villagers have been forced to flee into Thailand over the past week as a result of fighting between government forces and the Karen ethnic minority. Fighting between Myanmar's military government and the Karen, who have been fighting for autonomy for years in eastern and southeastern Myanmar, has increased since the fighting this year, ousting the democratically elected Aung San Suu Kyi, as well as in recent weeks since the rainy season ended. Recent major skirmishes have been caused most immediately by the raiding of a town in southeastern Myanmar named Lay Kai Kaw, which housed some former members of Aung's government and other rebel leaders. This news comes on the heels of a new BBC report from December 20th describing evidence of horrific torture and killing during the month of July by Myanmar military forces, apparent acts of retribution against men in villages that are being collectively blamed and punished for attacks by militia groups fighting against the February coup to restore democracy. At least 40 men were separated from the women and children in the villages, in the village of Yin and in the larger region of Kani Township in central Myanmar. The Myanmar military government did not specifically deny the allegations when presented. And thanks for listening, everybody. I appreciate the viewership and have a great day.